this is Commander Cod, and today I will be giving you some tips, hints, ideas, and hopefully some good old-fashioned helpful advice on how to properly construct ships in Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, which is actually a good bit more. There's actually a good bit more to it than just slapping guns and armor on. Balancing and all that other crap, it gets really, really difficult, especially if it's top heavy, then your ship can flip over more easily. If it's too heavy in the front, then a single torpedo can, in the right spot, can cause your guns to misalign and not be able to shoot at anything. Same thing if it's too heavy in the back. If it's off balance on the sides and prone to roll, then, well, same thing. One torpedo or a section flooding can throw off the alignment of all your guns, and then none of them can shoot, and then your ship's just a sitting duck. So how do you get all that stuff straightened out? How do you make a good, powerful, well-balanced ship? Well, I'm hoping to address that one here, because everybody has a different way or perspective on what it means to be well-balanced. Some prefer more guns on their more big guns on their battleships, I should say, instead of secondary batteries. I prefer heavy secondary batteries and smaller caliber large batteries. I would like, because in certain occasions, your battleships might be caught out in the open by themselves. Same thing for your battle cruisers. So I would like my battleships to be able to deal with any foes at any point in time, no matter what their situation may be. In this particular instance, I'm playing as Japan. I very much like Japan, and I like the idea of taking over the entirety of the Pacific. I'm currently at war with England and plan to take over Australia eventually. Sorry, guys, down there, but I want your land, and I want the money. I mean, look at that, 2 billion plus. Woo! 1 billion plus. All right, almost a billion. Oh my god! So let's do. So I'm gonna do that eventually, but that's not what this video is about. So we're talking about ship design. Now I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what I've got here, and then I'm going to cut to the main menu, and then I'm going to go through like age for age and give some examples of how to best utilize the size of the holes that you got to work with in various stages of the game. Now, of course, not every nation has the same design premise behind their holes as the Japanese, but you do find that most nations have they pretty much recycle the holes as the like amongst all the nations. Not everybody has completely unique hull designs. So we're gonna start off with the oldest ship I currently still have in my lineup, which is the Ikushima. I'm sorry. It's a light cruiser with 7-inch guns. Now, as I said, I prefer my ships to have like like my battleships, for example. My battleships, they have battleship guns, but they're one of the smaller calibers, because I believe, especially early in the game, big caliber doesn't mean anything because it's inaccurate, and it's better to be able to put more shells on target, faster reload times than big guns. Then when they fire, they're going to miss anyway. So this Kawashi class is armed with 11 10-inch guns. And I used to regard designs like this as funny ships. It's a funny concept, not something to actually make. But lately, at least, I usually make at least one of these per campaign just to see, if it's actually a good idea. But in this particular case, for this particular ship, Some folks might be wondering, why do I only have one gun up front? What's up with that? Well, because of this right here, for weight offset. Now, if that gets to be too much, like if it gets too bad, then your speed is gonna suffer. Your speed's gonna suffer. Your range is gonna suffer. Your overall ship balance is gonna suffer. If it's too heavy up front and it takes a torpedo like right here or right here, or hell, even right around here, it'll dip the whole damn front almost right into the water. Especially if it's over 30. Now, it won't always let you save the design. Usually, at least in my experience, I don't even try to save the design unless it's between 30 and 20, and that's if like I've tried everything else and nothing else works. You have to keep the ship balance. In this case, pitch is there's nothing I can do about pitch. Pitch is mostly affected by the length of your ship and the distribution of weight. Now, the reason why the pitch is in the yellow is mostly because of this section right here. This section, which leans more heavily towards the fore than aft, is what's throwing the pitch off. So, in rough weather, these guns are going to have a hard time hitting their targets. And so these, I mean, rough weather is nobody's friend, but because of overall number of guns, if you play the odds, you're gonna do well. So that's what goes on with this ship, and that's why I have to have it set up this way. You also really have to pay attention to your armor. Now, there are occasions, especially when you know that you don't have enough battleships or you don't have enough cruisers, and so you know you're going to be playing the hit and run game, where it's a good idea to armor up your aft more than your forebelt in order to better protect the rear end of your ship and your engines and your screws and everything while you're running away from your enemies. Like in this particular case, since I'm playing as the Japanese, and even the updated design that I did, the refit, where is it at? I think this is it. Nope, that's not it. That's another cruise. That's a battle cruiser of mine. I'll be getting to that later. Where is it? I think this is. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Since I'm the Japanese, and this is something else that's annoying as hell. They really need to get this straightened up. Like, it's okay when I do the refit or the redesign, but then when I go to look at it or view it or do something, it's like, oh my god, this doesn't work. And I'm like, it worked. Why are you complaining about it now? But since I'm the Japanese, I'm having to duke it out with the English and the Russians and the Germans and the French, countries that are much, much bigger than me, have a far larger supply of finances and people. So I'm having to take a bit of an unconventional approach where I focus my large ships into fleets together, and then create smaller fleets in various ports, backed up usually by either a battle cruiser or a heavy cruiser or a number of light cruisers, in order to combat other fleets that come into the areas, and mostly utilize destroyers and torpedoes to make up for the difference in firepower, which is really only an option later on in the game. Because early game, I'd say from, I believe the earliest you can start is 1895 to about, I'd say about 1910 depending on how much money you're pouring into your research, torpedoes aren't much of an option because of their incredibly short range. Now, of course, you could use swarm tactics with torpedo boats and destroyers, but as the game progresses, guns become more accurate. So you will wind up eventually losing far more ships than it's worth to take down a single French or German or English battleship. So, moving on. Now, this is the original design of the one I accidentally clicked on earlier. Now, you'll notice that all of these ships, most of them at least, are a little heavy in the fore. And that's because of this right here. There really isn't a whole lot you could do about that, because the design itself places more material, more armor on the front of the ship than in the back. And as you can tell, I've moved almost the entire superstructure towards the aft end section right here, and it's still a heavy fore. But so long as that's blue for me. I'm a little colorblind, but so long as it's blue and not yellow or red, you're pretty much in the green. Lots of colors there. But when it comes to designing your vessels, as I said, for myself, I prefer smaller caliber main guns. So we've got 4 twin 11-inch guns on here, and 26 double-mounted 3-inch guns. So this is a 60-gun ship if you do the math, and it was a real joy to make this ship. But there is just one little problem, and that is that it's a tiny bit off center. And that's nothing that I can fix. I spent hours trying to fix this. There's nothing I can do about it. That's entirely on the developers and figuring out how to straighten out their design process when it comes to building ships in the shipyard and whatnot. But you get the idea behind the entirety of this, and that is the concentration of firepower forward and aft is almost equal. And because of how it is set up, it also gives the broadsides of the ship on either side a substantial amount of firepower and firing rate. I could have gone with 4s if I had spaced it a little bit more, but 3-inch guns seem to be the happy medium. They've got great firepower. They have great concentration. They're very accurate. And if you utilize common pointed capped, which gives some armor penetration, versus just straight up HE shells, then it gives them a significant advantage even against light cruisers, even in the late game, because in most cases, even if they do have armor on their light cruisers, they can even cause serious damage to heavy cruisers. They don't really consider putting a bunch of armor on their superstructure, which is where most of their people are. So if you can put down enough fire, you can kill their crew. Of course, on other ships, I have bigger secondary guns. But this is a battle cruiser. It's meant to be fast. It's meant to be powerful, and it's meant to beat the hell out of any cruiser that it sees out on the seas. It even whacks battleships from time to time. For example, let's see, this is the Kamikamaru 2. Do I have 3? No. Okay. So then this is the up to date. So this is the newest up to date version. These are also 3-inch guns, but they're, of course, thanks to the advances in technology, they've they're they're thoroughly improved and have much greater range. Upgraded to 12-inch guns, 2 of them being triples, and of course keeping 2 doubles. The difference in secondary firepower changed a bit due to the difference in turret design. However, overall, it's pretty much stayed the same, and in fact, might have even gotten a little bit better. Because if just for the sake of gun depression, perhaps. I don't know, like if there were aircraft in this game, there aren't any aircraft carriers, seaplanes, nothing like that. But it would be a good idea to have some guns low, if that was the case, in order to help with gun depression and like a torpedo bomber trying to skirt the top of the waves. So you'll notice that I don't have any casemates on my battle cruisers. I will sometimes do it in the early game, but casemates in general are horrible. They're very inaccurate, have very little depression. They have very little in the way of flexibility. If you're in rough waves or your ship is flooding in one area or another, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be able to strike their target properly or at all. So I try to stay away from casemates unless they're up on like the superstructure, and even then, it's questionable. They're not very reliable. Even early game, early into late game, they're not very reliable. So only use casemate guns if you really have to. I know that some designs, they don't give you a whole lot of deck space to work with, so you have to put something in casemates. Let's see, I think this might be an example I've got. Yeah, see, this has casemates because there's not a whole lot of ship to work with here. Just getting these main guns on this heavy cruiser in position was a nightmare. And of course, in this game, you get stuck with some designs that there's really not much you can do anything with. For example, the fuel efficiency on this ship. If I wanted to try to get this setup done, this is all I could fit, were these 2 tubes. So there are some designs that you really don't have a choice. You can only do with what you've got. I've tried playing the Italian campaign in the past. Their heavy cruiser at the very beginning of the game only has enough room for 1 tube. One tube. So it's an abysmal heavy cruiser, and I normally don't even consider building it. But here are some other destroyer designs. I believe this is one that I showed in the slides, actually. I prefer my destroyers to be able to keep up with light cruisers in terms of firepower and speed, should they meet them in combat. Torpedoes are important, but, since, early game to, well, I think I'm in the 1920s now in this campaign. Torpedoes still have a fairly high fail rate. So torpedoes are good, but main guns are more reliable, even if they're less accurate. And since torpedoes are pretty slow, then they can be easily dodged if they have acoustics and sonar. So I always like to have a large number of guns on my destroyers if I can. let's see, this was my most advanced and most heavily armed destroyer that I created shortly before Destroyer Hull Type 3s came out. And I still have a large number of these, and I am updating them because of just how reliable and heavily armed they are. They have 7 4-inch guns and 2 triple torpedo tubes. These things are amazing. They overpower light cruisers easily. I built as many of them as I could within the amount of time that I had. And they are now relegated to home island defense because of how powerful they are and because of the overwhelming strength of the enemies I have to fight. They like to try to blockade me, and then these destroyers come out and say, I don't fucking think so. And then they all run away or get sunk, so it's pretty awesome. This is the destroyer type, one of the destroyer types I made. Now, here's a good way to make money in this game. A good way to make like a supplemental income. Make a good ship that you're not going to build. Something that you can sell to your partners in large numbers that's going to make you a ton of money, but not really cost you anything. And this is one of those. This is a ship that I have never built, but I designed it for sale. You know, it's got good range, good speed. It's it is as advanced as it needs to be. It doesn't use sap shells, it uses high explosive incendiary in order to help set larger ships on fire, which is another valuable thing I find that AI values more, is the ability to damage all kinds of ships regardless. So this is probably one of the main selling points. Depth charges and mine sweeping. I could have put mines on it, but I didn't want to turn this into a mine-laying vessel. I wanted this to be a firepower, all-purpose ship that my allies could buy for me, and they bought a lot of these. Like I think I sold like 20 or 30 so far, and the design isn't even that old. But you know, these are just some of the designs that I've had. We're actually going to dive into a bit of the first-hand account of construction, so you can kind of see how we do things in this game, what it's like at the very least. Now this has casemates, and I will tell you why. The reason why this has casemates is because of and this is probably one of the few designs. There are a couple that Japan gets. I'm not certain about everybody else, but with this particular design, the guns can fire all the way from here to here, which gives them a significant amount of flexibility in regards to firing on enemy vessels. Now, as far as up and down goes, of course that restriction still exists, but in the event that they are restricted by this, I have secondary battery guns up topside that can kind of make these irrelevant. These are basically here as supplemental armament. You know, they're there to complement the rest of the guns that are in place. They're not particularly needed, and when the time comes to modernize this ship once more, they're probably going to be the first thing I take off, are these casemates. And I'll probably replace these with more up-to-date armament, or more up-to-date guns. Another important factor to keep in mind when you're constructing your ships is statistics. I made a really, really, really stupid rookie mistake. I'm not proud of it, but it's important to highlight this. This is the original version of the ship that I just showed. Now, the stupid mistake that I made is that these are 15-inch Mark I guns. Now, some of you might be wondering, hey, come on, what's wrong with 15-inch guns, Mark I or no? Well, think about it like if, think of Mark I as prototype, okay? So it's a gun that you have, but it's not tested. It's a gun that's not refined, it's not been straightened out, all the kinks haven't been figured out yet, it hasn't been optimized. It is very much a prototype gun that you can put on your ship. And 15 inches sounds great, but it only matters if it hits. And the guns I just showed previously were 14s. 14 Mark IIIs. To put things in perspective to a 14 Mark III versus a 15 Mark I. A 14 Mark III has a 30% chance, 30% higher chance of striking its target at 5,000, a 25% higher chance of striking at 7,000, a 5% chance, 5% higher chance of striking at 10, 2% higher striking chance at 13, and on and on and on. The 15s, their accuracy stops at 10. And their accuracy at 10 is 0.02 if memory serves. So they are very inaccurate. Big gun, lots of damage, but very inaccurate. And they're much slower on the reload as well. So just because you have a big gun doesn't mean you should put it on your ship. Always pay attention to the statistics, which is something I'm going to point out when we get to that portion of the video. Now, of course, you know, everybody loves their super battleships. Super battleship! Woo! Yeah, man, that's what I'm talking about right there. Look at those guns, man. You know, but right now, all the biggest guns I've got are 16s, and they're Mark 1s. So even when this ship finishes being built, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anything until it gets a refit like Mark. I'm going to wait at least until Mark 2s. But everybody loves their super battleships. I just had to show this one just because everybody want to see this kind of thing. You know, super battleships are pretty amazing vessels. But oh my god, they are so expensive. Like, I was talking about Australia a little bit ago, about how, like, 2 billion, well, that would be enough for me to make, well, it was 2 billion and some change. So I could almost make 4 of these with that entire, with that province's income. So that's crazy. I might make 2 of these, maybe, but they're so expensive that it would very much be better for me to spend the funds on something else, like this, for example. I'm building these to replace a number of my heavy cruisers and to supplement my faraway fleets. These are my nod to Slime Sama, because I'm an anime guy, my Ranga class battle cruisers, and they are armed with 9-inch guns. Some of them triples, some of them doubles. They do 31 knots and have a range of over 30 kilometers. They are well equipped, they are well armed, and they outgun battleships because of their improved armament. That's another thing too. When you're building your ship, pay attention to the kind of shells you have. Bigger isn't always better, and you don't always have to max out, especially if you have good enough shells. A 12-inch gun can still penetrate 14 inches of armor. It just depends on what you arm your ships with. It's very it's very important to pay attention to those factors. And you don't always have to max out either, especially if you're trying to make an economy ship. Just give it what's good enough for what it needs to do. You don't have to go balls to the walls all the time. All right. Now, let's see. Of course, everybody likes their modern destroyers. So this is another design that I've done a little different with the guns, but the same number. So it has 6 guns, just in 3 double turrets, quadruple torpedo tubes, 2 triples, 34, 34 knots, 23,000 kilometers plus. Once you get access to oil and better engines, don't bother with boilers, because all the boilers do is add weight. Their whole purpose is to make your smokes is to make your stacks more efficient at drawing in air to feed the fuel, the fire, and give you more power. But once your engines become efficient enough and your fuel is good enough, you don't need boilers anymore. They just add weight and bring down the range and capacity of your ships. So keep that in mind too. And of course, radio detection finder. You don't have to put radar on everything. Now, I don't have access to radar just yet in this campaign, but I mean, you could put radar on destroyers if you really have to, but a radio detection finder, it works just as well. So you don't have to put that extra cost on every single ship. It's got to, let's see, which one was it? One of these is also a ship that I made specifically for sale. Yes, this is it. So this is a destroyer that wants to be a light cruiser, essentially. It has 2 quadruple torpedo tubes. I believe, yeah, these are well, I have 3 double-mounted 6-inch guns. This is a really good ship for what it is. It's, like I said, it's a destroyer that wants to be a cruiser, and it has a range of 48,000 kilometers. I just made this ship. I haven't sold any yet. That's why. But I'm fairly certain that, like, every single country that I'm allied with at the moment that wants a light cruiser that they could send to all theaters or do whatever they need or go wherever they needed to go, they're going to buy this. So always keep your customers in mind. Har, har, har. It's a good business model, actually, for, well, most companies, I would assume. Then, of course, you got your experimental ships. Like, this might be something I build. It's something I made. It's not necessarily, something I need, but, just a concept idea. This is a a new cruiser that I designed, a light cruiser concept. I couldn't basically mimic the Atlanta class due to hull restrictions for this design. So I made the next best thing. And in terms of forward facing and aft firepower, it might actually be superior in a sense. Then, of course, there's the new heavy cruiser concept I just made. This is actually kind of a copycat of a heavy cruiser design I made in a previous campaign, utilizing 9-inch guns. There are 5 of them on this, 5 dual mounted, with 2 triple torpedo tubes, 2 fore and 2 aft on either side, with a great deal of flexibility. They can almost fire straight off the bow and straight off the aft end of the ship, with a number of secondary battery guns to, help fight off a destroyer. I use 2-inchers because of their increased firing rate. And really, when it comes to destroyers, most of them max out at about 2 inches. So because of their armor penetrating capabilities, they could probably even damage light cruisers as 2-inch guns. So there is that too. I could show you guys ship designs that I've made all day long, but let's get to the meat of the matter, which is showing the restrictions and how to properly design a ship. Because this is going to be the main hurdle for most people. Because trying to get, I mean, it's something I even still struggle with, is trying to get the design to cooperate with the image in your head. Trying to find that happy medium. And I have OCD, so it's horrible for me. But those of you who don't have that problem, you know, it might come to you more easily, the idea of compromise. It's all about compromise. You gotta do what you gotta do. You can't put the guns on the ship that you want if the whole design doesn't allow it. So we are going to click over to the main menu, and we're gonna go into designing mode, and we're gonna see what we can do. We'll start with torpedo boats and work our way up. Let's see. Where's the best place to do this? No, let's go to share designs. I think this might be the better way. Now, I mentioned the Italians earlier. This is their heavy cruiser when you start the game in the 1890s. This thing is horrible. Absolutely horrible. None of these fit. Nothing fits that would make this ship worth making. To anyone from Italy who's playing this game, who's watching this video, I'm not blaming your country, I'm blaming the game. I'm not making fun of your country, I'm making fun of the game. If they wanted to, like, even if you drop this to as low as it'll go, as slow as it'll go, 15.5, the efficiency is still in the red. So, Italian heavy cruisers are not worth making, in my opinion. So, what is worth making as far as Italy goes? Like, what can you work with? What can you do with them? How do you get started with the Italians? Now, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, the Italians are the country in this game who are the worst off in the game. So, I naturally played their campaign a couple of times with mixed results. So, in my opinion, the best ship that Italy has in their arsenal at the very beginning that you can work with is their torpedo cruiser. Because folks are like, but hold on a second, Light Cruiser 1 has higher displacement, why not go with it? Because at the start of the game, torpedoes are going to be important as far as Italy goes, because none of your harbors will be big enough for you to make any battleships. All of your harbors are too small. Unless they change that in the last update, you can't make any battleships at the start of the game. 0. So, what are you going to use in order to combat everybody else's battleships? I rest my case. You're going to use torpedoes. Now, of course, your light cruiser is going to have to be as good as you can make it. So this is a design that I use at the start of every single time that I play as the Italians. Now, of course, you're going to want to pay attention to statistics, and that's why you don't choose some of these other ones. Like, you can choose this one, but smoke interference can kind of negate your accuracy, and torpedo spotting is important, But you know, if you want that extra bit at the front, then you can get it. But even with this, you know, you're still only going to be able to place 2 guns right here. Like for example, I always try to go with 5s, but apparently they won't fit. So we're probably going to have to switch to 4s. Let's see if 5s will fit with the minimal tower. Of course, you can play it as far back as you can, even if it doesn't make any sense. See little bits floating off the backside, but who's going to complain? You know, there aren't any actual people on these ships, so you don't have to design anything with them in mind. But see, even with the minimal tower, 5-inch guns won't fit here. So the best guns that you can put on this are 4s, unfortunately. But you know, pluses and minuses. That's just how it works. But with an added bonus, since they're 4s, they could fit there too. Keep an open mind. So, of course, same thing with the front. It's the same thing with the back. Pay attention to statistics. You know, statistics, cost, and weight. All these things play into your ship designs and what everything's capable of. What you can manage, what you can do. Another reason why this is a better choice than the other light cruiser design is, like mentioned, this is a torpedo cruiser. So it can have 6 torpedo tubes, 3 on port and starboard sides of the ship, which give it a significant bonus when it comes to dealing with hostile vessels. Now, when it comes to funnel design, you really got to be careful on this because the funnels early game are terrible when it comes to what they can manage in regards to like what they can do for your ship. That's the proper way to put it. Like even with all of these, it's still a yellow 88%. And now 4-weight is huge. But that's mostly because I haven't put any guns in the aft side. So don't freak out. And let's see if we can balance this sucker. That right there by itself helped out. But there's something else important. Is you should always keep in mind that you don't just have you don't just have to put your guns on the little indicators. If I can get it to play nice, then you can place guns. See, this is another thing that drives me nuts about this game, and that is that they really, really need to work on the ship design editor for this game, because you can place a 4-inch gun here. On the other light cruiser, you can do it. I've done it hundreds of times. I know you, so I know you can. But this right here, it says it's overweight. So what do you do about that? Well, you compromise. Fortunately, it's not overweight by much. So the way you compromise, let's see, those are dual funnel 2s. Let's go with stack. Nope. Let's go with small stack. There. And now, your 4-weight is fine. Engine efficiency, it's not great, but it wasn't great to begin with. And as you saw, there wasn't anything you could do about it. And even if you were to use these, which are the most expensive, the best ones you could put on it, they take up more room, and they only give you 0.5 more in regards to funnel capacity. So save your money, go with 7K instead of 11K. But now you're probably thinking, well, hold on a second, you did all the designing and stuff, but you didn't do any of this. you're right. I didn't do any of this. And that's because early in the game, it doesn't really matter because you don't have much in the way of options. Now, just for the sake of trying to keep your ships, like making them as good as you can, since you're not going to be able to make a whole lot anyway, uh, go with Citadel 1. Like, put it on there. I know that might not make that big of a difference, but it does add resistance to your hull design. It also adds weight, sure. Armor cost, yes, but it adds to armor strength as well. Even though it's just like superficial minimal armor, it still helps. Every little bit helps. So it is worth doing. So now for me personally, I prefer to armor my ships against their own caliber, at the very least. So since these are 4-inch guns, I do 4 inches of armor all around. Now, something else that's important though. Deck armor. Deck armor is not extremely important early in the game, because in most cases, it's going to be a miracle for them to even hit you. It's going to be a miracle for you to hit them either. Especially at least until rangefinders come around, and even the early ones aren't great. But there aren't going to be any guns, I guess with maybe very few exceptions. I think maybe France might have high angle armament, but you can go easy on the deck armor early in the game. You don't have to go crazy with it. But you should armor your superstructure. So I try to go as high on it as I can, or at least armor it against opposing destroyers. Well, not destroyers, but torpedo boats, because there aren't going to be any destroyers at this point in the game. And then, of course, do your little bit of deck armor there. Now, since that's that, put a little bit of armor on your open-mounted guns. The reason for that is so that HE shells have a harder time destroying your open-mounted guns. These aren't turrets. There's nothing protecting the people except for that shield right up front. That is it. That's all that's there. There's no armor to these things. So putting some armor on there will help protect them against HE shells. Now, AP, there's nothing you can do about that. If it's a direct shell strike from an AP round, then those guys are gone. And that gun is gone. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's an armor penetration shell. And that pretty much goes throughout the entire game. If an armor penetration shell hits one of your turrets, even late game battleships, if it strikes the turret, if it doesn't destroy it, it's going to heavily handicap it. So that's really all you can do. But this right here is the starter design for your Italian Navy. This is your battleship. This is your battle cruiser. This is your capital ship. This is what's saving your ass until you get better designs. And even as things progress, it's still a good idea to keep these ships around for a while. You just keep upgrading and updating, and doing the refit, and just keep doing that. And you could keep these ships around for a long time, because it's always cheaper time-wise to refit old ships than build and make new ones, especially if you're in the middle of a war. Now let's go to torpedo boats. And just for sake of art, just for the sake of doing things a little different here, let's see. Let's go. Let's go to the 1900s. Now, let's talk about some torpedo boat destroyers. Some torpedo boats. These things are a lot of fun. Torpedo boats are a lot of fun, but they're also really cheap and glass cannons. If you're not familiar with that phrase, you've been living under a rock. So I'm afraid I can't really apologize for that one. But let's do a modern design. Well, let's do a good design for one of these ships. Let's see. Yeah, let's go with this. This is better. So you're like, why is that better? Yeah, I'll explain. Don't worry. So torpedo boats are meant to attack in swarms. Swarms, scouting duty, uh, picket ships. That's what a torpedo boat is. At least until they get phased out in the game. You don't put big guns on on a torpedo boat because you'd be investing too much money because in something that's not going to survive. The whole purpose of these is to harass and defend your fleet against other torpedo boats. You can make them whatever speed you want. You always want to make your ships, no matter what they are, as good as you can. Granted, but there are some ships like torpedo boats where it doesn't really matter because they're expendable. They're I'm trying to think of a good term for these. They're the cannon fodder. I know it sounds kind of brutal, but that is the case. They are the cannon fodder of your fleet. You always want to pay attention to efficiency. Efficiency for your size, efficiency for the weight. What's efficient? Well, this is 5.5, this is 4.5. And you don't need too many of them, especially if you use induct draft boilers. Now, yes, the boilers do smoke interference, funnel cost, engine cost, and all that other crap, but in order to get what you need out of what you have, you've got to make some compromises. I don't go with decimals. I always do 28, 29, 30 whole numbers, because when you're running a ship in combat, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be going full speed, especially in rough weather. So there's no point in doing the decimals because you're not going to get that weight. You're not going to get that speed any damn way. So just go full on. Go whole numbers. Do the best that you've got. Now you've noticed I've got 2 up front. I've left space here for 2 more. And I might put them back here, but I doubt it. Because you got to work with your weight and your angles. Now, you might be wondering, why don't you put it here? Because the mount is halfway off the ship. It's riding right there on the side. And in this game, if it's right there on the side, and a shell hits right around here, right in this area, it's going to blow the torpedoes up and all their ammo. So never put your weapons right on the side of the ship. Never put them on the side of the ship. Even the guns here are just inside the hull of the ship. That's fine. Never put them on the hull. Even if it does give you that little bit of extra, don't do it. It's just a terrible idea. It really is. Now, I'm putting them further back in order to make room for 2-inch guns. Now, because, like I mentioned earlier, these things are meant for harassing and sinking torpedo boats. Torpedo boats cannot have any armor at all, which means it doesn't take much to sink them. So you really don't need to put big guns on these things. If you want to make a gunboat, hey, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. You can do that. But it's not the greatest of ideas. Now, this gets a little tricky in regards to the fact that the game wants to mess with me here, which I don't appreciate. Stop it. There we go. And then we can put these right there. And just like that, we have a 12 gun, 2 triple, 2 single torpedo boat, armed torpedo boat. Now, I gotta say, that's pretty damn well made as a setup. Now, you could argue about putting the twins up front and the singles in the back, which you could do. There's not really any problem with that, but the thing is that if you do that, then it might throw this off. And the roll is already bad. But because we have more weight to play with, let's see what happens when we put doubles up here instead of singles. We'll angle them right there. Now see, aft weight didn't change that much. Mostly because of, I can't get it to pull it up because they need to fix this. This giant block that just shows up and blocks all the statistics. They need to fix that. But you can see on the right hand side of the screen, right underneath what says sections, a little diagram of our boat. And you see that there's a red line right underneath the white dot, that white line that shows where the center mass is of our ship. The center mass of the ship is basically where the engines and vital innards of our vessel are. That's why the aft weight is offset. It doesn't have much of anything to do with the guns. It's actually all about the engine mass, which actually plays in on most designs of most ships that you're going to use and build until you get up to like really big calibers, like 14s, 15s, 16s. I guess 13s kind of count, but like 14s and up is when the weight of turrets and stuff gets pretty gnarly. Wow, that's an old word. But anyway, mines. Do not underestimate mines. Mines, they can damage or they can sink ships. So putting them on vessels that can carry them is always a good idea. It's pretty much always a good idea, unless you want to make a specialist ship. You want a special kind of ship for a special kind of purpose. Like I've made vessels that were specifically for mine laying, and for laying mines and clearing out mines. Now, you guys saw me click on this. Like what? Why? You might wonder why I did this. That's because this personal preference for me. I prefer to have the same number of AP shells as I do have HE. But by default, most ships are going to carry more AP shells than HE. I don't know why. That doesn't make any sense to me. But it's just the way that the game is. So I suppose if you go max HE, I guess it'll balance it out. But I prefer the standard ratio because in most cases, it's AP shells that are going to sink enemy ships, not HE. HE will burn them out. HE will damage them. HE might make their ammunition stores and everything blow up with good strikes. But AP shells, they're what put the holes in the vessels. They are what disable enemy ships. They're the ones that cause the internal damage. They are what's going to win the war. AP shells help. AP shells win. HE helps. So, like, HE is great for light ships, torpedo boats, destroyers, light cruisers, especially if they're SAP shells, semi-armored penetration shells. If you use powerful SAP shells on light armored ships, you could annihilate them with a single shot. So. I mean, hey, it's all up to preference. I'm just here to help guide you. So, talked about torpedo boats, talked about some light cruiser designs and ideas. Let's get to somebody else. Let's go to something else. Let's talk about dreadnoughts. The first battleships you're going to get access. The first real battleships you're going to get access to. Now, this, to me, is not a battleship. This is something that you're going to use to get from point A to point B. Same with this. There's not a whole lot that you can do with it. I will say this, though. Before, just this bonus information. If you use these designs, take note that at the moment, unless they make some kind of improvement, these holes have almost no bulkheads. They are extremely susceptible to sinking. Any strikes below the waterline or at the waterline that cause them to take on water will make these ships sink extremely fast. It's not just turret cruisers, it's the patrol boats, not PT. It's, let me see. Where's Germany? Germany has them, a couple other nations have them too. Let's see, who else? Who else? I guess it's not France. There's Germany. Oh, did they take them away? Oh, okay, that's good. That's good that they took those away because, like, be very wary of those designs because they're very prone to sinking. It really doesn't take much. See, the Russians have them too. I don't know what it is. I guess it's a buoyancy problem. But unless they fix it, try to stay away from that design. So, alright, let's get back to what I was talking about here. Well, here. Japan has the same design. This is your first kind of dreadnought. The first real dreadnought you're going to get. Now, everybody has their own semi-dreadnoughts. That's what they're called. But this is the first design you can actually do something with. So, in regards to that, you're always going to want your battleships at least fast enough to keep up with your fleet. You don't want to hold your entire fleet back with them. So, if your light cruisers are 20 knots, if your light cruisers are 21 knots, your torpedo boats are 25 knots, your heavy cruisers should be like 19 or 20 knots, and your battleships should be 17 to 18 knots. That's what I try to do. To me, your destroyers and PT boats always need to be faster, not only to intercept your enemies, but also to help them get away from enemies because of how vulnerable they are. Now, of course, depending on what technology you have available to you in your campaign, you might not always have access to what they show here. It all depends on how much money you're willing to pour into your research and development. but it's always a good idea, at least in my opinion, unless like I said before, there are some circumstances where, it's fine to not max everything out, especially if you're, just trying to sell something or make a stopgap ship or something of the sort. But otherwise, you always want to try to put everything you can into it. Because the minute you make, this is important, the minute you make the design, you solidify it and you start constructing it, the minute you make it, it is becoming obsolete. Because your technology is progressing, it's not stagnant. Which means that by the time that ship finishes being built, if it takes 12 months, if it takes 9 months, if it takes 15 months, by the time that it is done, other technologies will be finished being researched, which means that these ships, at the time that you design them, are now obsolete to a degree. Then they'll need to be upgraded and updated, and they'll need to have, new things added. That's why we go through the whole refit thing. Of course, the option isn't available here because, I'm not in campaign, but so now I mentioned this earlier. Mark IIIs. Just take a second. I'm sure you could pause the video and take in the statistics for the Mark III 9-inch guns. Okay? Now, look at the statistics for the Mark II 10-inch guns. Did everybody see the difference? Mark II 10-inch guns, even though it's bigger, its max firing range is 10,000 meters. The 9-inch guns can fire out to 12,500 and still have a chance to strike. Not a great chance, but they've got a chance. Not only that, but they have a faster reload as well. They don't do as much damage, but that doesn't really matter, because damage only matters if you hit your target. Now, luckily for this design, you have access to stereoscopic rangefinders. So you have some long-range gun accuracy, which is going to help a lot. So we're going to go with the Mark IIIs. And we are going to put some 9-inch guns here. Some folks watching this, is that all you're putting? That's kind of pointless. Yeah, you're right. But that's why we're going here. The secondaries. Always pay attention to how you can mount your guns. And in this particular case, since we can put 9-inch guns here, well, now look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Now you have an 8-inch broadside, port or starboard, and you have a 3-inch, and you have you have an 8-gun broadside, port or starboard, and you have a 6-gun, I think, yeah, a 6-gun fore or aft. So these are now very potent battleships. But wait, there's something missing. What about the secondaries? Unfortunately, this is one of those where you can only put casemates, because there's no room on this ship for you to put secondary turrets. Now, you can, you know what, in this particular case, I wouldn't put 3s, because yes, they are a little bit heavier, but they're Mark IIs. Oh, go away. But they're Mark IIs, and they don't fire as fast. In regards to wanting torpedo boat defense, it's better to go with 2-inch guns, because they fire faster, they have more ammunition. It's just an overall better idea. So, okay. Next point of interest, barbettes. There are going to be a number of people who are like, well, if we don't have barbettes, we don't need barbette thickness. Yes, you do. Because even guns that are not on barbettes have barbettes. They're in the hull of your ship. Now, I learned this lesson very harshly with my German Frenulf class that I made in a previous campaign. I think it was like last year. But if without barbettes, if you take a torpedo right here, it's going to blow that turret sky high, and the ammunition is going to go up. And then that's going to follow, and 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 that one's going to go too. And if you're lucky, your ship will still be afloat, but it'll be crippled. If you're not, then you'll lose the ship. With barbettes, that torpedo strikes, and you have a chance of not losing that gun and everything else along with it. So it doesn't matter if the gun is on a barbette mount that's above the hull or not. You need to use barbettes because they are there. So you need to use protection. Now, again, this is just me, personal preference, going standard. Now, for your main, I wouldn't use sap shells. I pretty much always go with capped or some other variation of capped shells. For HE, common pointed cap shells, that's, to me, is always going to be the better choice. Black powder is a very important, that's something else that's very important to pay attention to. Look at the statistics for everything that you use. This is a very much involved process. Like, people who play EVE Online or other super complicated games are going to love this game because it's just as complicated. But, like, for example, let's look at black powder. +2 to hull weight, -10 shell damage, adds to shell weight, shell cost is cheaper, and minus some muzzle velocity. Fun fact, when your ships are firing and fighting out on the ocean, their guns sound different depending on what powder you're using for your guns. Now, in this particular case, given the statistics, I would keep this on black powder. Specifically, because black powder has no risk of ammo detonation, does not add any risk of ammo detonation, flash fire spread, or chance of fire. It doesn't add any of that. Pitric acid is even worse. -60% shell penetration. Adds to damage, HE damage, and HE shell fire chance. But at the same time, it adds shell weight. It increases shell cost a great deal. Lowers shell muzzle velocity. And adds an incredible chance of ammo detonation, flash fire spread, and chance of fire to your ship. I never use pitric acid in any respect on any of my vessels, and I pretty much stick exclusively to TNT when it comes around because TNT overall gives like the best statistics. Like even with the increased shell cost, lower of HE damage and fire chance, it's still a far safer product to use on your vessels in any situation. It just is. And you also got to pay attention to your gunpowder. You got your black powder in your shells, and you got your charging powder. Basically what propels the shell through the gun. You know, I think you start off with brown powder, which is like that crap, and you progress to white powder, which has way worse statistics. And unfortunately, as things become obsolete, you can't use them anymore, and so you gotta choose you gotta pick your poison basically. Like which way would you like to die? In a sense, and of course, with this, you would for me, I would do the armor to my guns, so that my armor can at least defeat my guns. I don't plug this into my equation, because then it can get insane in some cases. Especially if you're using citadels, it does it for you in a sense, because Citadel 2 adds 3.5 resistance plus 5% armor strength. So in a sense, it kind of equalizes itself. So you don't have to go absolutely crazy. In early game, it doesn't do a whole lot, but early game, you know that nobody's gonna have 14-inch guns. Then you don't have to go with 15s. Don't dunk it down to 14. Just give yourself that little bit of extra weight, because sometimes that wiggle room can really help you out. Of course, in like simulated battle mode, you can choose the level of training for your soldiers, for the sailors on board your ships, but in campaign you can't do that. So I've talked about torpedo boats. I've talked about early light cruisers for Italy. I've talked now about early battleships. But what about something more advanced? Let's talk about British battleships. Big old British battleships. Now, I've never played as the British, but it follows the same kind of concept as like everything else. You're going to want... I always fill this out first whenever I design. I've been going a little bit different just to help with my tutorial, but in most cases, you're going to want to start with this anyway. You're going to want to start with this first, because it affects the weight and cost of your ship overall. And in order for you to know what you're playing with and what you can, how much weight you've got to work with, it needs to be where it's gonna sit at. After you've made all your improvements, what can you do? Now, I'm not gonna mess with this just yet. I usually leave that be until until like the end of the process. But see the difference in the weight now? It's a pretty big difference, and that makes the difference between designing this whole thing with, say, like 10s and 3s, only to then find out that you could have gone with 12s and 4s or something, or you should have gone with 9s and 2s, because of the difference in weight. It saves you from having to delete everything and start all over again. So, also, with all the adjustments we made here, it makes the engine efficiency, it shows me proper engine efficiency, which is at 300%, which is amazing. Which means instead of 20 knots, we can make this 21 knots. So there's all kinds of good stuff that can occur just from, paying attention to your ships and doing a little preliminary work before the actual design process begins. Now, there you go. Now you notice I put down that third, and this didn't change. That's because the maximum is 300%. currently. I don't know if that's going to change in the future. So there's no point in having that. But then you still have that weight. So what do you do? Well, if you want to be efficient, you change what they are. And it's going to lower the weight, and it's going to help keep your balance, because then you don't have a tube here, and nothing here. Now you'll have 3 tubes. Let's see. So funnel capacity was 55. It was, so let's go with 3 of these. It'll also, by having different turrets, there we go. See, bam. By having not different turrets but different stacks, it's also a smaller smoke signature, and less smoke interference. So, and not only that, but this is 403 and this is 548. So you're saving weight too. So it's always a good idea to pay attention to that stuff. So I recognize this whole design. It's reminiscent of the HMS Dreadnought. So I don't really remember what its calibers were. So I'm gonna do like a rough general build of HMS Dreadnought. Let's see. I believe it was 1 in the front, 1 in the back. I think that's HMS Dreadnought, wasn't it? I don't think it had a thing in the back, just a barbette in the back just yet. That was on another design. I don't really remember, but I'm sure somebody will probably say something if they feel like it. And of course, you're going to want to put your barbettes to help protect your ship. Now, because of the design, unfortunately, it doesn't leave much for like small. I mean, you can put secondary turrets. You can. But let's see, put one there. But then it affects it can't shoot, it can't move that far anymore. And also, apparently the placement for these is freaking sucks. So basically what you'd have to do is you'd have to trick the game into letting you put them there. So that kind of sucks in general. So if you want secondary guns, like I said, in some cases you don't have a choice. Casemates are all you're going to get to work with. So you're going to want to go with 2s for increased firing rate. I guess we'll move this back a little bit. I guess it was getting in the way of the casemate somehow. Yep. And you only get 2 up front. Wow, that's disgusting. And then you get those back there, and you get a bunch back here. So that's helpful. That's a good compromise, I suppose. But yeah, that's your HMS Dreadnought, I suppose. And of course, you do your adjustments and whatnot. Go your ballistic cap shells and change all that stuff. But the important thing is that while we're doing all these designs, is we're keeping our eyes on this. Now, you can't always do anything about pitch. Now, pitch is, it's going to be a problem to a degree on most ship designs that you're going to make. But it's not going to be a permanent issue. So, it's going to be a problem, but it's not going to be a problem. It's a little difficult to explain. Basically, is only going to be a really big issue in really rough weather. And there's some bad weather in this game. So, I mean, hell, there's also like whiteout fog, so there's that too. Now, let's go to a late ship design. Let's do a good one. A late big ship design. Let's go with a battle cruiser. Now, a lot of folks are I'm certain a lot of folks are confused about this. But like, what's the point of a battle cruiser? Now, battle cruisers often can be just as good or useful as battleships or dreadnoughts. So, what's the point of the battle cruiser? Is it just another battleship? Well, it kind of is, but not really. Think of it more as the premise is a heavy cruiser that's basically on steroids. It's faster, it's stronger, it's bigger, it's better than a regular heavy cruiser. But it's also more expensive. So battle cruisers essentially are meant to operate as a fleet all onto their own. You know, with like maybe some escorts or as additional firepower to a main fleet. They are not picket ships. They are not specifically patrol ships. They can act as individual warships, but they're not really supposed to. I mean, it's kind of follows suit in combat. You know, nobody's supposed to go alone. You know, even in ground combat, you know, tanks travel with infantry, or they're supposed to. Fighters travel in squadrons, not solo acts. Submarines travel in packs. You know, you're never supposed to be by yourself. If you're by yourself, then something's wrong. Now, there are many different ways to design one of these. This is I'm just gonna throw something together here that I've done before. Always pay attention to weight though. You know, there's this. This is a problem. Now, folks might be like, well, what's the problem? What's going on? Well, I mean, it looks nice, right? Looks good. Looks like a decent, solid start, right? Look at the weight. 2,250 tons already. And the back is 930 tons. For what? For what purpose? For what reason? Now, the statistics are a little different. Sure. But pay attention to them. For example, aiming speed and damage control is higher for this. Okay? But base accuracy is better. And damage control isn't much worse. Tower spotting is also better. Torpedo spotting is also better. So this is not a good idea, even if it gives you that extra turret, because this, which is 456 tons, 456 tons, this is 930. Now keep 456 in mind. And then we go over to here. This is the lightest medium superimposed barbette, which is for 13-inch guns and lower. It's only 94 tons. So you add 94 tons to 456, and you still come out lighter than the Advanced Rear Tower 2, with some statistics being better. So pay attention to that stuff, because it can save you a lot of weight, and it can do you a lot of favors. Now, so let's go with this. Let's make this ship. And of course, because since we just pointed out what we did, we're going to pay attention to statistics. You know, the Advanced Dreadnought Tower. Ooh, looks cool, looks great. But is it really? Now, in this regard, it seems that it is better, but it's also a great deal heavier. So the question then becomes, do you want to bite that bullet? Do you want to? Do you think you should? Because it also takes up a great deal of space. All this on the sides. So there's that too to put into consideration. So we can go with that for now. We could do that. We could do that. So, and now we look at this and we're like, oh no, engine efficiency, it's so sad. Well, we haven't done this yet. Now it's fine. Now we don't need to make any adjustments, especially if we do this. We switch from coal to oil. Then we don't even need a boiler. And then we go to turbo electrics, and we're good. And our weight goes down. See? Well, it's all about the statistics. Gotta pay attention to it. It's good stuff. Now, I'm gonna do something for the back here that I showed off on one of my designs. Now, because I like having secondary guns on my ships. Because, like I said, I prefer my ships to be able to handle themselves if something happens. But, maybe you're a little different. Now, here's an important note. I gotta put this one out here. Don't, at least for now, until the AI gets itself straight, in this game, do not put torpedo tubes on your battleships under any circumstance. Because your battleships, battle cruisers, heavy cruisers, they're supposed to operate from the center of your fleet. They are the heavy artillery, they are the fire support, they are the big gun that goes boom. They do not, if they have torpedoes and they're in the center of your fleet, and an enemy ship somehow gets close enough that they launch their torpedoes at it, then your fleet has failed. Your picket ships have screwed up. You don't have a good fleet formation. Something has gone wrong. If you have super long-range torpedoes on your battleship, and there's a ship out in the distance, then the battleship is going to launch its torpedoes at that ship from the center of your fleet. Which means any of your ships that are between that battleship's torpedoes and that enemy ship are going to catch those torpedoes. And the AI is, at least at the moment, only configured to maneuver and attempt to avoid enemy torpedoes, not yours, not friendly torpedoes. I have lost far too many ships to friendly torpedo fire to the point where I no longer place torpedo tubes on any battleships or heavy cruisers that are meant to operate inside of a fleet. I don't even put them on my battle cruisers. Instead, I compromise by giving them armor penetration shells so that their smaller guns on the battle cruisers can still keep up with battleships. Let's see, this recording's going on for about an hour now, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this, maybe do a follow-up. I think I've pretty much covered everything to a degree. If this gets a bunch of views and a bunch of comments and folks want a follow-up video, or they have specific questions or something I haven't thought of for this video, then I'll make another one. And with that, I suppose that's it. I hope you all have yourselves a fine day, and stay tuned for more video footage. Take care and have a great one.